In this video, we're going to be factoring the expression 2 times quantity x minus y to the fourth plus 14x minus y to the third plus 24x minus y to the second. So now this is very similar to the last several examples that we've done in difficulty 4, where we don't have an expression that involves just like one variable. We have several variables here that are all raised to some power. And similarly to previous examples, we also have a leading coefficient of 2 out in front of the highest power. So we're going to have to figure out how to deal with that. And another issue that we see here that makes this not exactly a quadratic is that we have a fourth power, a third power, and a squared here of this x minus y. So we're going to have to first maybe factor out some of these x minus y's in order to get this into a quadratic form that we could then factor in the usual way. So first things first is, well, we notice that the lowest power of x minus y is this x minus y squared. Each of the other terms have at least 2 x minus y's. So we can pull out an x minus y squared from every single term. I'm going to break one of my rules now and not rewrite it because it's just so long it'll go across the entire page. So I'm just going to leave it as such, just put a little equal sign here, and factor off an x minus y squared from everything in sight. So this gives me x minus y squared times the brackets 2 times x minus y squared. Why? Because we pulled out 2 of them from here. Plus 14 x minus y to the first, which I'll just leave empty, plus 24. Again, we only have 1 here because we pulled 2 out of it. So we had 3 things, take 2 away, you have only 1 left. Here we took all 2 of them out. So we're left with just 24. So, all right, so out here we have this x minus y squared times brackets. So this is brackets that this kind of contains a quadratic formula already, or a quadratic expression already. So notice that we have x minus y squared plus 14x minus y plus some constant. So this is getting closer to being a normal quadratic expression. So we can also, it turns out, factor this 2 out of everything that we see here, because we have a 2 leading in front of the x minus y squared. We also have a 14, which is divisible by 2. And we also have this 24, which is also divisible by 2. So we can factor a 2 out of all of these things here. So why don't we do that? We have to bring this x minus y squared along for the ride, but then we can also multiply by 2 because we're going to factor it out of everything here. So we have x minus y squared plus 7x minus y plus 12. All I did was factor 2 out of all the terms here. All right, so now this looks like a quadratic of the form that we're very much used to at this point. We don't have any leading coefficient. The only difference now is that we have this x minus y squared as opposed to, say, just an x or just a z or something like that. So what we need to do is run a substitution just as we're used to. So we're going to let z equal x minus y. So every place we see an x minus y, we're going to replace it with a z. You could do the same with this one, but I'll just leave that because that's not really what we're working on here. So this gives us, well, I have an x minus y here, so I'll square a z plus 7z plus 12. Okay, so now this is definitely quadratic that we know how to factor at this point. We need to find 2 numbers that multiply to 12 that add to 7. So examining the factors of 12, you get 3 and 4 are the first ones that come to mind. So those multiply to 12, and they also add to 7. So we have 3 times 4 gives us 12, and we have 3 plus 4 gives us 7. So we're in good shape with that. We can factor this, therefore, as, well, we're going to carry this along for the ride. This factors nicely as x plus 3 times x plus 4. Oh, sorry, not x, it would be z, my bad. All in the brackets. Okay, so now that we have this, everything inside brackets is perfectly factored. We're ready to go with that. Everything out here is perfectly factored. And now, since we have only multiplication of all of these things in parentheses and this 2, I can drop the brackets because multiplication is, as I mentioned in previous videos, associative, meaning I can change the orders of brackets or I can remove brackets. So this gives us x minus y squared times 2 times z plus 3 times z plus 4. Okay? So this looks pretty well factored at this point. The only thing that we need to be concerned with is that we still have this z floating around. We made the substitution for x minus y, so every place we see a z, we're going to plug in this x minus y again. So this gives us x minus y squared times 2 times quantity x minus y plus 3. Don't forget that plus 3. And then we're going to replace this c with an x plus y. Sorry, an x minus y. X minus y quantity plus 3. No, plus 4. Jeez. I'm on my A game today. So this is basically fully factored. If you wanted to simplify this a little further, you could try to combine like terms in here, but we really don't have any like terms to combine. But we could remove these internal parentheses in either case. So we have x minus y squared times 2 times quantity x minus y plus 3 times x minus y plus 4. Okay, so at this point, this is entirely factored. It's as factored as it's going to get. Can't really factor this much more. Yes, you could write it as x minus y times x minus y, but this looks cleaner, so we'll leave that as is. You could FOIL this out, but that's not really going to simplify it. It'll in fact complicate it. So what we have here is a perfectly factored version of this massive expression here. And all we did was we first factored off the x minus y squared because there was an x minus y squared in common across all of the terms. So that's the first step. Then we also factored out a 2 from everything because we saw that 2 divides 2, 14, and 24. So we pulled the 2 out. And then we found out that, hey, look, we almost have a quadratic, so we just needed to substitute z for x minus y. So then we get a quadratic that we can factor using normal methods. That gave us z plus 3 times z plus 4 inside the brackets. And then after some simplification, we end up down here. So those are basically all the steps that you needed to solve this. So factor out common stuff as much as possible, substitute, factor, resubstitute, and then simplify. That's all we did. So with that, we are done with example 4.